I never thought the lowest job in the Terran Colonial Corps would save my life. Standing at the servants' gate of the Kirathi Royal Palace, plasma rifles slung across my back, watching purple-skinned nobility glide past without acknowledging my existence. That was my entire world. Guard the gate, check credentials, salute when required. Die if something goes wrong. Simple, forgettable, safe. Then Queen Shakara herself stopped in front of me, 4 arms folded, obsidian eyes boring into mine, and said words that made every Kirathi in the courtyard go silent. "You will sleep in my daughter's room tonight, human." I should have known then that nothing would ever be simple again. The war ended 3 years before I got assigned to the gate. Humanity lost. Not spectacularly. We didn't go down fighting like the propaganda vids promised. We just broke. The Kirathi sovereignty swept through our outer colonies like a cold wind. Their fleets so advanced our missiles couldn't even track them properly. Their soldiers moved like shadows, thought in unison, killed without hesitation or mercy. By the time they reached Earth's orbit, we were already negotiating surrender. I was 17 when the treaties were signed. Watching the feeds with my father in our cramped apartment on Luna Base, both of us knowing exactly what came next. The sovereignty didn't exterminate conquered species. That would be wasteful. They integrated them, assessed them, put them to work where they'd be most useful. Turns out humans were useful for exactly 3 things: manual labor, dangerous mining operations, and filling out the lower ranks of military forces the Kirathi considered beneath their own precious bloodlines. My father chose the mines. Said he'd rather break his back in an asteroid belt than wear their uniform. I respected that. I also ignored it. Joined the Colonial Corps the day I turned 18, shipped off to basic training on Kepler 442b. Learned to shoot, salute, and swallow my pride. The instructors were mostly Kirathi junior officers, cold, efficient, dismissive. They spoke to us like we were children playing soldier. In a way, we were. Basic was 6 months of learning that humans were slow, weak, emotionally unstable, and tactically inferior. We learned it in the way they assigned us equipment: second-hand armor that didn't quite fit, rifles 3 generations behind Kirathi standard issue, rations that tasted like recycled cargo foam. We learned it in the way they watched us struggle through obstacle courses designed for beings with 4 arms and double our muscle density, then logged our failures without comment. I graduated middle of my class. Not remarkable enough to get noticed, not terrible enough to get reassigned to the mines. Perfect for gate duty. They sent me to Kiraxis Prime, the sovereignty capital. Billions of souls across 100 worlds, and I ended up standing outside the smallest, least important entrance to the royal palace. The servants' gate at the eastern wall, where delivery drones dropped off supplies and low-caste workers shuffled in before dawn to clean floors the nobility would walk on. My first year, I spoke maybe 20 words total. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. Credentials verified. 90% of the beings who passed me wouldn't meet my eyes. The other 10% looked through me like I was furniture. I told myself it was fine. I had a bunk in the guard barracks, 3 meals a day, and I wasn't dying in a mine shaft. That was more than a lot of humans had. Then I met her. It was early morning, that purple-grey hour before Kiraxis Prime's twin suns broke the horizon. I was checking a delivery manifest when I heard it, crying. Soft, broken, muffled like someone was trying to hide it. I looked up. There, pressed against the palace wall just inside the gate, was a Kirathi child. She couldn't have been more than 10 cycles old, barely 4 feet tall, her 4 arms wrapped around herself. Her skin was the deep violet of high nobility, her silver hair, the mark of the royal bloodline, hung in front of her face. She wore a sleeping gown embroidered with constellation patterns, and she was shaking. I hesitated. Protocol said I didn't leave my post. Protocol said I didn't interact with palace residents unless they addressed me first. Protocol said a human guard speaking to a royal child without permission was grounds for immediate execution. But she was a kid, and she was crying. I stepped through the gate, kept my rifle low, my voice soft. "Hey, are you okay?" She flinched, looked up. Her eyes were silver too, full of tears and something else, fear, real animal fear. "Please," she whispered in Kirathi Standard, the language all Corps members learned. "Please don't tell them I was here." "Tell who?" "Anyone." She glanced back toward the palace, toward the towers that stretched into the morning sky. "They'll just send me back to my room, and I can't go back there." I crouched down, made myself smaller, less threatening. "What's wrong with your room?" Her face crumpled. "It's where she died." I didn't ask who. I could see it in her eyes, the weight of it, the kind of loss that doesn't heal, just gets carried. I knew that weight. Watched my mother waste away from radiation sickness after the reactor leak on Luna. Watched my father fold into himself afterward, become a ghost in his own skin. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. She stared at me, like she'd never heard those words before, like they were alien. "You're human," she said slowly. Not an insult, just an observation. "Yeah, name's Marcus." "Lyra." She wiped her face with two of her hands, a gesture so achingly familiar it hurt. "They say humans are weak, that you feel too much." Probably true. "My mother says it makes you unreliable, that you can't be trusted with important things because you let emotion cloud your judgment." "Your mother's probably right too." Lyra tilted her head, the way Kirathi did when they encountered something that didn't fit their logic. "Then why are you being kind to me?" "Because you're sad, and because I remember what it's like to lose someone." Something shifted in her expression. A crack in the wall. "My sister," she whispered. "She died 6 months ago. They haven't changed her room. They won't let me in, but they won't change it either. It's like she's still there, but she's not. And everyone pretends it didn't happen, and I just..." She broke down again, and I did something incredibly stupid. I put my hand on her shoulder. Touching royalty without permission was a capital offense. But she didn't pull away. She leaned into it, this small alien girl with 4 arms and silver hair, crying onto the armor of a human guard she'd just met. We stayed like that until the suns broke the horizon. "You should go back," I said eventually, "before someone notices you're gone." She nodded, wiped her face again. "Thank you, Marcus." "Anytime, kid." She slipped back into the palace, and I returned to my post, heart hammering, half expecting Kirathi security to descend on me. Nothing happened. The day proceeded normally. I guarded the gate. Life continued. Except Lyra came back the next morning. And the morning after that. We'd talk. Never for long, 5 minutes, maybe 10. She'd tell me about her sister, about the pressure of being royalty, about tutors who expected perfection, and a court that valued logic over feeling. I'd tell her about Earth, about Luna, about my father in the asteroid mines. Small things, human things. I knew it was dangerous, knew every conversation was a risk. But she needed it, and if I'm being honest, so did I. Those few minutes before dawn became the only time I felt like more than just a uniform. 3 months. That's how long it lasted before they noticed. I was mid-shift when 4 royal guards surrounded my post. Full armor, plasma lances, faces hidden behind mirrored visors. "Marcus Chen, you will come with us." No explanation, no charges, just cold certainty. They walked me through the palace halls, past murals depicting Kirathi conquest, past windows overlooking gardens I'd never be allowed to enter. Servants pressed themselves against walls as we passed. I tried not to shake. They brought me to the throne hall. It was massive. Obsidian floors polished to mirrors, pillars carved from single pieces of violet crystal, ceiling so high it had its own weather system. And at the far end, on a throne that looked like frozen starlight, sat Queen Shakara. She was terrifying in the way mountains are terrifying, ancient, immovable, aware of her own power. 4 arms rested on the throne's armrests, her silver hair braided into complex patterns that denoted her rank, her achievements, her bloodline. Her face could have been carved from stone. Lyra stood beside the throne. She wouldn't look at me. The guards forced me to my knees. "Marcus Chen," the Queen's voice filled the hall like thunder. "You have been observed engaging in unauthorized contact with Princess Lyra Shara of House Kiraxis. You have touched royal blood without permission. You have spoken to her without authorization. You have, by your very existence, contaminated the sanctity of this court." I kept my eyes down, tried to steady my breathing. This was it. Execution. Maybe if I was lucky, they'd make it quick. "Look at me, human." I raised my head, met her obsidian eyes, saw nothing in them, no anger, no mercy, just cold assessment. "My daughter has not spoken more than 10 words a day since her sister's death," the Queen said. "Her tutors report she barely eats. She refuses therapy. She withdraws from court. She is failing in every measure of her duties." A pause, heavy, calculated. Then you arrive, and suddenly she wakes before dawn. She engages, she shows emotion. The way she said that last word, like it was something distasteful, something beneath her. "My advisors tell me to execute you, that a human cannot be allowed such access to royalty, that your influence is a stain on our house." I waited for the blade, the plasma bolt, whatever they used. Instead, Queen Shakara said, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath, "You will sleep in my daughter's room tonight, human." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. I could hear my own heartbeat. "Your Majesty." One of the advisors stepped forward, all 4 arms gesturing in complex patterns that meant protest in Kirathi body language. "This is highly irregular. A human in the princess's chambers. My daughter sleeps alone." The Queen cut him off. Voice like a blade. "She has slept alone since Kira Shara's passing. The room beside hers, her sister's room, remains sealed, empty, a tomb." She leaned forward slightly. "Lyra Shara suffers, and suffering makes weakness. Weakness is unacceptable in House Kiraxis." She stood, 7 feet of regal authority. "My daughter responds to this human, therefore he will remain close. He will occupy Kira Shara's chambers. He will be available should Lyra Shara require." Conversation. The word dripped with disdain. "You will report to me weekly on her progress. You will not leave the residential wing without permission. You will not speak of this arrangement to anyone. Am I understood?" I found my voice somehow. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good." She waved a hand dismissively. "Lyra Shara will show you to your quarters. You are dismissed." The guards hauled me to my feet. Lyra finally looked at me, her silver eyes wide with something between hope and terror. She moved to my side, small and fragile next to the armored guards. We walked in silence through corridors I'd only seen from a distance. The residential wing was quieter than the rest of the palace. Thick carpets absorbed sound. Walls were lined with portraits of Kirathi ancestors. Air smelled like night-blooming flowers from the gardens below. Everything whispered wealth, power, legacy. Lyra stopped at a door marked with silver inlay, constellations and mathematical equations woven together in beautiful complexity. Her hands trembled as she pressed her palm to the lock. The door opened. I stepped into a dead girl's room. It was preserved perfectly. Books on shelves arranged by size and subject. A desk with star charts spread across its surface, calculations written in precise handwriting. Clothing folded in a wardrobe. A bed made with military precision. Everything clean, dusted, maintained, and absolutely empty of life. Kira was 16 when she died, Lyra whispered. She was brilliant, top of her academy class, solved quantum navigation problems our best scientists struggled with. Mother said she'd lead fleets one day, command armadas. She touched a book spine gently. She was also kind. She taught me math, told me stories, let me sleep in her room when I had nightmares. What happened to her? Lyra's face closed up. Sickness, something the doctors couldn't identify. It ate her from the inside. Took 3 months. By the end, she couldn't even recognize me. She turned away. Kirathi don't die from disease. We're engineered against it. But she did. And no one knows why. And no one talks about it. And I'm supposed to just continue. Like she never existed. I looked around the room. This shrine to a lost child that no one would enter, no one would change, no one would grieve properly. Your mother said it was a tomb. It is. We keep our dead close, but we don't mourn. Mourning is weakness. Logic is strength. Move forward. Adapt. Survive. Her voice cracked. But I can't. I can't just forget her. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Probably another capital offense, but I was already here. Already doomed. You don't have to forget. You just have to learn to carry it. How? Carefully. One day at a time. And you don't do it alone. She looked at me with those silver eyes. Is that what humans do? It's what we try to do. Doesn't always work, but we try. That night, I slept in a dead princess's bed, in a palace where I didn't belong, knowing I was either the luckiest or most doomed human in the sovereignty. Turned out to be both. The next morning, Lyra knocked on my door before dawn. When I opened it, she was holding 2 mugs of something hot and sweet-smelling. I thought, maybe we could talk, like before, but inside where it's warm. We sat in Kira's room, my room now, though I couldn't think of it that way yet, and talked. She told me about her tutors, her studies in quantum mechanics and military strategy. I told her about Luna, about the stars visible from the observation deck, about my mother's garden that she kept in hydroponic pods. It became routine. Morning talks. Sometimes she'd bring breakfast. Sometimes she'd just sit and do her homework while I read Kira's books, advanced physics texts I barely understood. But I tried. Sometimes she'd cry about her sister, and I'd listen. Weeks passed, then months. The Queen summoned me for my first report. I stood in her private study, smaller than the throne hall, but somehow more intimidating. Books in dozens of languages. Tactical displays showing fleet positions across sovereignty space. A window overlooking the city below. Lyra Shara's tutors report improvement, she said without preamble. She engages in classes, completes assignments, shows initiative. She turned to face me. Her therapist reports she speaks of her sister now, processes grief, shows emotional regulation. That's good, Your Majesty. Is it? She moved closer. Tell me, Marcus Chen, what exactly do you do that our trained professionals could not? I listen. Our therapists listen. With respect, ma'am, they listen to fix. I just listen to hear. Something flickered in her obsidian eyes. Explain. You want Lyra to be strong, to be logical, to be a proper Kirathi royal. Your therapists work toward that goal. They listen to identify problems and solve them. I chose my words carefully. I don't want anything from her. I just let her talk. About Kira, about being sad, about being angry that everyone expects her to move on. I don't try to fix it. I just witness it. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. That is very human of you. Yes, ma'am. My people would consider it inefficient. purposeless. Probably. Yet it works. She returned to her desk, picked up a datapad. You will continue. But there are conditions. You will receive proper quarters designation. You will be assigned light duties, administrative work, nothing that removes you from the palace. You will attend cultural orientation sessions to better understand Kirathi customs. And you will report to me bi-weekly. Personal reports, not through channels. I understand. Do you? She looked up. You are the first human to live in the royal residential wing, the first of your species to have private access to royalty. My advisors are furious. My military commanders question my judgment. Every day you remain here, I spend political capital I can ill afford to lose. Her voice went cold. You will not waste this opportunity. You will not betray my trust. You will not fail my daughter. Or I will make your death last longer than you thought possible. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Your Majesty. Good. Dismissed. I left feeling like I'd just signed a contract written in my own blood. The cultural orientation sessions were taught by an old Kirathi scholar named Veloth. 4 arms, gray skin, eyes that had seen centuries. He treated me like a fascinating specimen. Not hostile, just deeply curious about human psychology. Your species confuses us, he said during our 3rd session, his office filled with ancient texts and artifacts. You are individually weak, yet you've survived wars that should have exterminated you. You are emotional to the point of irrationality, yet you've produced art and philosophy that resonates across species. You feel pain intensely, yet you endure conditions that would break Kirathi minds. Sounds like you can't decide if we're admirable or pathetic. Precisely. He gestured with 2 arms. Take grief. When a Kirathi dies, we acknowledge the loss, redistribute their responsibilities, and continue. Efficient. Logical. The deceased becomes part of our collected history, our data, our legacy. But they are gone. We do not dwell. And humans? You dwell. You mourn. You create rituals to process death, funerals, memorials, anniversaries. You speak to the dead as if they still hear you. You keep their belongings. You tell stories about them. You let the grief reshape you. He leaned forward. It seems like torture. Why do you do this? I thought about my mother. About the small garden pot I still kept in my barracks locker, the one she'd grown tomatoes in. About how I'd talk to it sometimes, telling her about my day like she was still listening. Because forgetting them would be worse. Because the pain proves they mattered. Because love doesn't just stop when someone dies, it has to go somewhere. I met his ancient eyes. You make it sound inefficient, but maybe efficiency isn't the point. Maybe some things are worth the pain. Veloth made a note on his datapad. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Do you know what the Queen sees in you? No, sir. Neither does she, I suspect, but she's too intelligent not to investigate. He smiled, a gesture Kirathi rarely used. You are an experiment, Marcus Chen. A test of whether human emotional processing has value beyond what we've calculated. Succeed with Lyra Shara, and you may change how the sovereignty views your entire species. Fail, and you simply confirm our existing assumptions. No pressure, then. Oh, immense pressure. But I don't think you'd want it any other way. Humans seem to do your best work when the stakes are impossibly high. That night, I found Lyra standing in front of her sister's door, the sealed entrance I'd been forbidden to enter. She was just staring at it, 4 arms wrapped around herself. It's been 8 months, she said when she noticed me. 8 months since she died, and I still can't go in there. Do you want to? I don't know. Part of me does. Part of me thinks if I go in there, it'll make it real. Like she's really gone and never coming back. I stood beside her. She is gone, Lyra, that's already real. I know. Tears tracked down her violet cheeks. But if I go in there and see her things, her bed, Her smell. It'll hurt. Yeah, it will. Then why would I do it? Because avoiding it hurts too. Just differently, slower, deeper. I looked at the sealed door. Sometimes you have to walk through the pain to get to the other side. She turned to me. Will you come with me? If you want me to. She pressed her palm to the lock. The door opened. Kira's room was nearly identical to the one I'd been given. Same layout, same furniture. But where mine felt like a museum, this one felt frozen. A half-finished equation on the desk. A book left open on the bed. Clothing draped over a chair like she'd just taken it off and would be back to put it away. Lyra stood in the doorway, shaking. You don't have to do this today, I said gently. No, I do. She stepped inside, crossed to the desk, touched the equation written there. She was working on this when she got sick, trying to solve faster-than-light communication. Said if she could crack it, we could coordinate fleets across the galaxy in real time, change warfare forever. Her voice broke. She never finished it. Maybe you could finish it for her. Lyra looked at me. I'm not as smart as she was. You don't have to be. You just have to try. She picked up the stylus beside the equation, stared at the numbers. Then slowly, she started writing, adding variables, testing solutions. Her hands moved with growing confidence, muscle memory of lessons her sister had taught her kicking in. I watched a 12-year-old girl commune with her dead sister through mathematics and understood for the first time why the Queen had kept me alive. Lyra worked on her sister's equation for weeks. Every evening, she'd come to my quarters, to Kira's room, and sit at the desk, filling pages with calculations. Sometimes she'd ask me to read her work aloud, said hearing it helped her think. I didn't understand a word of it, but I read anyway, stumbling over quantum mechanics terminology, while she nodded and made corrections. You're a terrible science assistant, she told me one night, but she was smiling when she said it. Best I can do is moral support. That's more than I had before. 3 months after she'd first entered Kira's room, Lyra solved it. The equation her sister had died working on, she cracked it. Took it to her tutors, who took it to the military strategists, who took it to the Queen's Science Council. Within a week, they were building prototypes. The Queen summoned me again. My daughter has accomplished something our best minds considered impossible, she said. And for the first time, I heard something other than ice in her voice, pride maybe. She credits you. I didn't do anything, Your Majesty. That was all her. You gave her space to grieve, permission to feel, context to understand that pain can coexist with progress. She paused. Very human concepts. Yes, ma'am. I am beginning to understand why your species survived the invasion. You are weak individually, but you create strength in each other. You process trauma into purpose. You transform suffering into motivation. She looked out her window at the city below. We Kirathi believed emotion was weakness, that logic alone would make us strong. Perhaps we were incorrect. I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed silent. You will remain with us, the Queen continued. Lyra Shara still needs you, and I find your perspective valuable. You will be given officer rank in the Colonial Corps, access to resources, a voice in cultural integration programs. She turned back to me. You will help us understand your people better, so we can lead them better. Something cold settled in my stomach. With respect, Your Majesty, humans don't need to be led better. We need to be equals. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. You forget yourself, human. Maybe, but you asked for honesty. You said you valued my perspective. I met her eyes. You're learning that we feel, that we grieve, that we create connections. But you're still treating us like subjects, like tools, like we're resources to be managed instead of people to be respected. You lost the war. We did, and we accepted that. We serve, we follow orders, we guard your gates. I took a breath. But if you actually want to understand us, you have to see that we don't want to be understood just to be controlled more efficiently. We want to be understood to be seen, to matter, to have a say in our own future. For a long moment, I thought she'd kill me. Her face was carved stone, her forearms rigid with tension. Then she laughed, sharp, short, utterly humorless. You are either the bravest or most foolish human I have ever encountered. Probably both, ma'am. Dismissed. Before I remember, I could have you executed for insolence. I left, heart hammering, wondering if I just signed my own death warrant. That night, Lyra found me packing. You're leaving? Her voice was small, fragile. I might not have a choice. I think I made your mother very angry. What did you say to her? I told her. Everything. About equality, about respect, about humans being more than subjects. She listened quietly, then said, Kira would have liked you. Yeah. She always said the sovereignty's biggest weakness was that we conquered instead of cooperated, that we took instead of traded, that we saw strength only in dominance. Lyra sat on the bed. She used to argue with our tutors about it, said real power came from building alliances, not breaking wills. They said she was too young to understand politics. She sounds smart. She was, and she was right. Lyra looked up at me. You're right too. But my mother won't admit it. Not yet. She's too proud. Then I'm dead. No. Something fierce entered Lyra's voice. I won't let that happen. You saved me, Marcus. When I was drowning in grief, you threw me a rope. I won't let them take you. But 3 days later, they didn't take me. They took her. I was in my quarters when alarms screamed through the palace. Security lockdown, all personnel to defensive positions. I grabbed my rifle, headed for the door, and found royal guards blocking my path. You will remain here, one said. No explanation, no details. I spent 6 hours locked in that room, listening to distant sounds of combat, watching emergency shuttles launch from the palace landing pads. My clearance codes had been revoked, my communication access cut. I was blind, deaf, and utterly useless. When the door finally opened, it was Veloth. His gray skin was pale, his ancient eyes haunted. What happened? I demanded. Separatists, a radical Kirathi faction that believes the sovereignty has grown weak through expansion. They infiltrated the palace, took hostages. He paused. Princess Lyra Shara was among them. My blood turned to ice. Where is she? The Eastern Wing. They have 18 hostages, including 3 members of the royal court and 2 council members. They're demanding the Queen abdicate, that the sovereignty return to isolationist policies, that all conquered species be released from service. That last one doesn't sound so bad. Veloth's look could have cut steel. They've killed 4 hostages already, made examples. They are not negotiating in good faith. They are terrorists using political language to justify murder. What's being done? The Royal Guard is preparing an assault, but the separatists have superior position, advanced weapons, and hostages in the line of fire. The tactical computers estimate 70% hostage casualties if they breach. 70%. Lyra had a 70% chance of dying. There has to be another way. There is not. The Queen has given the order. The assault begins in 30 minutes. He turned to leave. Wait. My mind was racing, puzzle pieces falling into place. The Eastern Wing. That's where the servants' gate is, the one I used to guard. Yes. Why? Because I know that gate. I know the wall, the courtyard, the service corridors. I spent a year studying every crack in that stone because I was bored out of my skull. I grabbed his arm. I can get in there. Small, quiet, through routes they won't be watching. You are one human with a rifle. I'm one human who knows that wing better than anyone in your tactical team. And I'm one human who doesn't show up on Kirathi life sign scanners because our biology is too different. It was a long shot. A desperate, stupid, impossible long shot. I can scout, find exactly where they're holding the hostages, give your assault team accurate intelligence. Veloth studied me. You would risk this? She's 12 years old, and she's my friend, so yes, I'd risk everything. He made a decision. Come with me. 5 minutes later, I was in the tactical command center, facing the Queen herself, and a room full of military commanders who looked at me like I was insane. Absolutely not, one general said immediately. A human scout? They'll hear him from 50 meters away. I can move quietly. You cannot move as quietly as our operatives. No, but your operatives register on bioscanners. I don't, and I know that wing. Every service corridor, every ventilation shaft, every entrance the automated systems don't monitor because nobody bothered to update the maps after I was assigned there. I pulled up the tactical display, marked 6 different access points. Here, here, and here. Paths your team doesn't have in their database because they're for garbage collection and low-level maintenance. I use them daily. The Queen's eyes were locked on me. You are volunteering to infiltrate a terrorist position to save my daughter. Yes, Your Majesty. Why? Because she listened when I talked about my mother. Because she cried with me about people we'd lost. Because she was a kid who deserved a future. Because I was tired of being furniture. Because it's the right thing to do. One of the commanders scoffed. Human sentiment. Tactical suicide. Maybe. I looked at the Queen. But sentiment is what makes us try impossible things. It's what makes us run into fires to save strangers. It's what makes us fight when logic says we should surrender. I straightened. You asked me once what humans do that Kirathi can't. This is it. We care, stupidly and completely, about people we barely know. And sometimes that stupidity saves lives. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then the Queen said, You have 20 minutes. Find my daughter's location. Report back. Do not engage. Am I understood? Yes, Your Majesty. They gave me light armor, a comm unit, and a scanner. No weapons. I'd be moving too fast, too light. One of the Royal Guard pulled me aside before I left. If you get her killed, human, I will spend the rest of your life making you regret it. If I get her killed, I'll help you. I went in through the old maintenance shaft behind the eastern wall, tight, dark, smelling like recycling systems and old metal. I'd used it 100 times to avoid walking the long way around during shift changes. Crawled through on my stomach, heart hammering, listening for any sound above me. The shaft opened into a storage room. I checked the scanner. 3 heat signatures in the corridor beyond, moving in patrol patterns. I waited until they passed, slipped out, moved along the wall. The palace was eerily quiet. Emergency lighting cast everything in red. My boots made soft sounds on carpet that seemed deafening in the silence. I moved from shadow to shadow, checking corners, listening. I found the first body in the north corridor. A palace guard, throat cut, eyes staring at nothing. I kept moving. The hostages were being held in the Grand Conservatory, a room with windows overlooking the gardens, plants from 100 worlds, and exactly 1 entrance. The separatists had chosen well. Anyone coming through that door would be cut down instantly. I counted 12 hostiles. Military-grade armor, plasma weapons, defensive positions. And in the center, surrounded by 18 Kirathi on their knees, was Lyra. She was terrified but alive, silver hair matted with blood from a cut on her forehead, 4 arms bound behind her back. I pulled back, keyed my comm. Command, this is Chen. I have eyes on the hostages. The Queen's voice came through immediately. Report. I gave her numbers, positions, weapons, everything I could see. Ended with, "They're dug in hard, Your Majesty. A frontal assault will get hostages killed. We are aware. Stand by." Stand by. While Lyra sat in there, terrified. While terrorists debated which hostage to execute next. While the clock ticked down. No. Command, I have a different idea. Negative. You will await orders. With respect, ma'am, I'm not asking permission. I switched off the comm. I'd spent a year in this wing. I knew something the Separatists didn't. The conservatory's environmental controls were in an adjacent room, accessible through a vent shaft. The plants needed specific temperature and humidity, which meant the systems could be manipulated. I found the vent, pried it open, squeezed through. The control room was small, cramped, filled with pipes and readouts. I started adjusting settings. Dropped the temperature 15 degrees, cut the humidity, increased oxygen content to uncomfortable levels. Within minutes, frost started forming on the conservatory windows, the plants began wilting, and the Separatists in their heavy armor started sweating, uncomfortable, distracted. I keyed the comm back on. Command, I've compromised their environment. They're going to move hostages soon to somewhere more comfortable. When they do, they'll be vulnerable. 30-second window, maybe less. A pause, then the Queen's voice, cold and sharp. You disobeyed a direct order. Yes, ma'am. Court-martial me later. Right now, you have your window. Another pause. Then, all teams, prepare to breach on my mark. I watched through the vent as the Separatists started arguing. Saw them gesture at the hostages at the door. Saw them make the decision. They started moving. The Royal Guard hit them in the corridor like a hammer. Plasma fire, flash grenades, precise and brutal. It was over in seconds. The Separatists never had a chance. I climbed out of the vent, ran to the conservatory, found Lyra being untied by a medic, found her looking around frantically. Marcus! She saw me, pulled away from the medic, ran, threw all 4 arms around me and held on like I was the only solid thing in the universe. You came for me. Of course I did. You could have died. Yeah, but you're worth it. She pulled back, looked at me with those silver eyes full of tears. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The Queen appeared in the doorway. She looked at me holding her daughter, at Lyra's arms wrapped around a human, at the scene that shouldn't exist by every logical calculation. Marcus Chen, she said quietly, you disobeyed a direct order. I did, Your Majesty. You risked your life without authorization. Yes, ma'am. You created a tactical opportunity that saved 18 lives, including my daughter's. I didn't know where this was going. I just did what I thought was right. She walked forward, stood in front of me, and then, in a gesture I'd never seen a Kirathi make to a human, she placed one hand on my shoulder. You embody everything I have learned about humanity. Reckless, emotional, illogical. A pause, and absolutely invaluable. She looked at the commanders around us. Effective immediately. Marcus Chen is promoted to Cultural Liaison, First Class. He will head a new department focused on human integration, with authority to recommend policy changes. He will report directly to me. Her eyes swept the room. And anyone who questions his judgment will answer to me personally. To Lyra, she said, you were right about him, and your sister would have been proud. Then she left, taking most of the military with her, leaving me standing there trying to process what had just happened. Veloth approached, ancient eyes gleaming. Congratulations, Marcus Chen. You just changed the trajectory of human-Kirathi relations. I just wanted to save Lyra. Precisely. That is what we've been failing to understand. You do not calculate optimal outcomes. You do not weigh costs and benefits. You simply care, and you act on that care, regardless of personal risk. He smiled. We have much to learn from your species, and you, I think, will teach us. That night, after the debriefings and medical checks and endless questions, I returned to my quarters, to Kira's room. Lyra was waiting there, sitting at the desk where she'd solved her sister's equation. Mother made me promise not to work too late, she said, but I wanted to see you before sleep. How are you holding up? Scared, shaky, grateful. She looked at me. You risked everything for me. You'd do the same. Would I? She looked uncertain. We're taught not to. Taught that logic must override emotion. That individual lives matter less than collective success. What do you think? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think Kira would say that collective success without individual value is just survival, not civilization. That the point of building empires isn't to create perfect systems, but to create space for imperfect people to flourish. She looked at her sister's equation, still visible on the wall display. I think she'd say you're what the sovereignty needs, someone who reminds us why we're doing all this. I'm just a guy who used to guard a gate. No. Lyra stood, crossed to me, took my hand in two of hers. You're the human who showed a princess that grief is not weakness, that feeling is not failure, that sometimes the most logical thing you can do is something completely illogical, because people matter more than calculations. She smiled through tears. You're my friend, and you're a hero, even if you don't see it yet. I pulled her into a hug. This small alien girl who'd changed my life by being brave enough to cry in front of a stranger. You're pretty heroic yourself, kid. I learned from the best. 6 months later, I stood in the grand hall where I'd once knelt awaiting execution, wearing officer's insignia, surrounded by humans and Kirathi working together on integration protocols. The Queen had been true to her word. Human voices in governance, cultural exchange programs, mutual respect instead of subjugation. It wasn't perfect. Species don't overcome centuries of conflict in months. But it was progress. Real, tangible, impossible progress. Lyra was there, of course. 14 now. Taller, more confident, working on advanced studies that would one day make her a fleet commander like her sister never got to be. She caught my eye across the room, gave me a small wave. I waved back, thinking about how strange life was. How I'd joined the Corps to escape the mines. How I'd been assigned to the most boring post in the sovereignty. How I'd met a crying child and made a choice to be kind instead of correct. How that choice had changed everything. Veloth appeared beside me. You look contemplative. Just thinking about gates. Gates? Yeah. I spent a year guarding one. Thought it was the lowest point of my life. Turned out it was exactly where I needed to be. I looked at the room full of humans and Kirathi talking, planning, building something new together. Sometimes the smallest doors lead to the biggest changes. Very philosophical, very human. He smiled, though I notice you avoided the actual question I came to ask, which was... The Queen is hosting a diplomatic summit next month. Earth's new representative government will send delegates. She wants you to coordinate human cultural protocols. He paused. It will mean returning to Earth, seeing your father, confronting your past. My father. Still in the mines, last I'd heard. Still breaking his back because he'd been too proud to wear the uniform I'd chosen. Will you go? Veloth asked. I thought about it. About the scared 17-year-old who'd fled Luna rather than face his father's disappointment. About the gate guard who'd been invisible. About the man I'd become by choosing to see a crying child instead of ignoring her. Yeah, I said. I'll go. Someone needs to tell him that humanity isn't defined by the wars we lost. We're defined by what we do next, by how we choose to care, even when it's hard, even when it's illogical. I smiled, even when it means sleeping in a dead girl's room because a living girl needs a friend. Veloth nodded. I will inform Her Majesty. And Marcus? For what it's worth, I believe your father will be proud. You embodied the best of humanity when it mattered most. That is worth more than any uniform. As he walked away, Lyra joined me, looked up with those silver eyes that had seen so much loss and learned to carry it. You're leaving? She asked. Just for a little while. I'll be back. Promise? Promise. Someone has to make sure you finish your homework. She laughed, a sound that still felt like a small miracle every time I heard it. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, kid, but you're going to be fine. More than fine. You're going to change the galaxy. We're going to change it, she corrected. Together, humans and Kirathi. Like Kira wanted. Like you showed us was possible. I looked out at the city beyond the palace walls, at the stars visible in the darkening sky, at the future. We were building one impossible choice at a time. I'd been just a guy guarding a gate. Now I was something more. Not because I was special, or chosen, or destined, but because I'd seen someone in pain and decided that mattered more than protocol. Because I'd chosen connection over safety. Because I'd been willing to risk everything for a 12-year-old girl who just needed someone to listen. That's what humans do. We feel too much, care too deeply, love too completely. We make illogical choices that somehow change the world. And standing there, watching Lyra smile, knowing my father would hear about the human who changed the sovereignty from the inside, I realized something. Being human wasn't weakness. It was exactly the kind of strength the universe needed.